Welcome everyone to the This is New Zealand webinar held and broadcast to a lot of people in different places around the world. My name is Bore Chum. I'm a licensed immigration advisor. I'm also the managing director of Migration Associates, a company that can help you with the visa process. I'm joined with a colleague and a fellow Kiwi, Mark Morrison from New Zealand Skills in Demand. And today we're going to run through and try to give you a snapshot of what it's like to live in New Zealand. I'll hand you over to Mark for him to introduce himself to you.
Thanks very much, Bore. So yeah, as Bore said, we're both very, very proud Kiwis. And look, the purpose of today's webinar, is for you to try and understand different aspects of the move out to New Zealand. I'm the International Operations Manager for New Zealand Skills in Demand. And so certainly getting a job and certainly in Bore's case helping you with visas are two very important aspects to the move. But as New Zealanders, we want to talk to you tonight also about life in New Zealand in general. And we're going to be discussing some different elements and certain parts of everyday life in New Zealand which we have been lucky enough to experience ourselves. So Bore is based in Christchurch in New Zealand. I'm actually speaking to you from London in the United Kingdom, but we'll be making the move back to New Zealand later this year, which I'm very, very excited about. Just quickly before we push on further, I would like to pay special thanks to a couple of our key sponsors who have helped put together our webinar today. Firstly, the Bank of New Zealand, who have been helping us with our various events over the years. I'd like to thank the Bank of New Zealand for their continued support, and they can certainly assist you with opening a bank account before heading out to New Zealand. And secondly, Migration Cover, who have been assisting us with running these webinars especially, and also attend our seminars in the United Kingdom. So for the peace of mind of making the move overseas, certainly pays to engage with Migration Cover after this webinar, so you can speak with them about covering yourself should anything untoward happen in the process.
Mark, just thanks for that, Mark. And we are really appreciative of our sponsors, Bank of New Zealand and Migration Cover, both who can help you with the move out to New Zealand and with their services. Mark alluded to the fact that I'm based in New Zealand, and I've only just returned. I've been in the UK for 10 years. I'm now living in New Zealand for the last 3 months. A big change in our lives, even though we're Kiwis. And I think the key thing is, if I give you an example of last weekend, and Mark, you're probably aware of this, it was 22 degrees in Christchurch on Saturday, and on the west coast and on the Southern Alps it was snowing. They got a great dump of snow, and people were skiing. So half the side of the South Island was sunny, the other half was with ski weather and whatnot. And it's just amazing in the winter when you get your crisp frosts, but during the day it's just warm. And certainly last weekend was a great example of the differing sort of weather elements and what you could do in that weather. And I know that the skiers across the country, especially down the South Island, are enjoying having fresh powder and getting out there and doing it. And certainly we've had a lot of friends and family who've gone up to the Alps and went out for a ski. So that lifestyle and that outdoor activity, for me, it's accessible, and it just reminds me of that New Zealand lifestyle that I've forgotten a lot because I've lived in the UK for 10 years. So certainly a lot you can do with your children. And the weather over here, even in the winter, it is cold in the morning, but the sun comes out and it's not grey or foggy or whatnot. It's a beautiful, crisp, blue sky day.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Bore. You're making me very homesick. So what we're going to do now is we're going to crack into things. So Bore is actually going to jump into the chat room where you can engage with us throughout tonight and ask any questions that you might have. Bore is going to do his best to keep up and answer any questions, and then he'll be coming back on board later to talk about the visa process. Okay, so hopefully just popping up on your screen is the first page in our This is New Zealand seminar series webinar. Okay, so as I've mentioned, we would like to thank the Bank of New Zealand and Migration Cover for their support. So, briefly looking at an overview of today and how the webinar will proceed. So firstly, for the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to be speaking to you, looking at a general overview of New Zealand. After that, I'm going to be talking to you about the process of getting work in New Zealand, getting that all-important job offer. After that, Bore will come back on and he'll be speaking to you about the New Zealand immigration process. And then we'll finish tonight answering some general questions and answers for about 10 to 15 minutes. So firstly, looking at New Zealand in numbers. So we're a small country, 4.5 million people. About a third of our population live in Auckland. So that's about 2/3 of the way up the North Island. And as I said, that is our big city. So about 1.5 million people live in the greater Auckland area. In terms of a population breakdown, looking at the different cultures and races that we have in New Zealand, so around 70% of our population is European. So European descent, English, Scottish, Welsh and Irish ancestry is certainly strong in New Zealand. Around 15% of our population is Indigenous Maori. On the right there you can see some very traditional carvings and also some tattoos on the men as well. You wouldn't expect to see a man tattooed like that walking down the street very often in New Zealand. It's certainly more for cultural or ceremonial events these days. But certainly that culture is something that we celebrate, hugely in New Zealand. It's something that we're all very proud of. We have about just under 10% of our population is of Asian descent. Now in New Zealand, when we refer to someone of Asian descent, we're referring to someone from perhaps South Korea or Japan or the Philippines, as opposed to the subcontinent, someone from India or Pakistan. So there is a slight differentiation there. Lastly, about 7% of our population is non-Maori but of Pacific Island descent. Okay, so that's our Samoan, Fiji, and Tonga. And if any of you have ever watched an All Blacks rugby game, you would have seen a few of those boys in the team scoring some nice tries. Okay, so Bore's already touched on our weather. So New Zealand has relatively mild temperatures with moderately high rainfall. And many hours of sunshine throughout most of the country. So our climate is dominated by our geographical features, which is the mountains and the seas. So we're a very long and narrow country. We're influenced by the warm weather that comes across from Australia. We're influenced by the cold weather that comes up from Antarctica. So the weather can be ever-changing and quite dynamic. Being in the southern hemisphere, January and February are our warmest months, and July is the coldest month of the year. So as Bore said, we're right in the middle of winter, but the other day it was still 22 degrees. So it's certainly not too bad at all. In summer, average maximum temperatures are typically around that 20, mid-20s, maybe into the early 30s, and in winter typically around 10 to 15 degrees. Looking at some of the main cities, so Auckland has a more warm and temperate climate with hot, humid summers and mild, damp winters. It's the warmest main centre of New Zealand. It's also one of the sunniest with over 2,000 sunshine hours per year. Christchurch, so halfway down the South Island on the east coast, has a dry, more temperate climate with an average daily maximum temperature of about 22.5 degrees during summer and just over 11 degrees during winter. In winter, it is common for the temperature to fall below zero, as Bore referred to. So it will get cold at night, but then generally it will come out in a nice, crisp, clear winter's day. Where you just have to put a warm jersey on, but you can still get out and enjoy the sunshine. So we've done some comparisons, looking at some main cities in various cities and countries around the world, trying to compare them to New Zealand. So as you see, if we compare Auckland and Christchurch, you'll see Auckland is a lot more tropical. Perhaps it's a little bit more similar to Australia's weather on the east coast, somewhere like Brisbane or Sydney, somewhere like that. But with that comes more rainfall. So Christchurch has half the rainfall, but is obviously a little bit colder. Sunshine hours are around the same, so between 2,000 and 2,100 hours a year. If you compare that to the UK, well, you're going to be smiling a lot more, because as you'll see, the sun shines out a lot more than in the UK, between sort of 12 and 1,500 hours per year in places like Birmingham and London. Certainly compared to Pretoria, not quite as much. Certainly somewhere I need to visit based on those sunshine hours. And then looking at Canada, very similar in that regard. So in terms of the rainfall, South Africa and the UK very similar to Christchurch, and then Vancouver quite similar to somewhere like Auckland in terms of the average rainfall. Looking at housing, now this will be an important element for everyone that comes to New Zealand. We always recommend that you rent first when coming to a new city, and certainly to a new country. It's a good way for you to learn the market, understand the different areas, and understand just how the market works in practice. So a lot of rental properties are unfurnished. That's one thing you might have to get used to, apart from some basics such as an oven, carpets, and curtains. Rent is normally paid weekly, and 4 weeks bond is to be paid in advance. The landlord pays the council tax, or what we call rates in New Zealand, and this is included in the rental price. So if you see a figure quoted on a website in New Zealand, that will be the weekly amount, and you don't have to factor in additional costs for rates on top of that price. Okay, that's covered by the homeowner. In some areas, the tenant does not pay for water usage either. So, for example, in Christchurch, where Bore is based, the water usage is actually covered by the homeowner, so you would not be responsible for water usage. In a city like Auckland, you need to check, depending on the area, you might be responsible for a partial payment on the water, but it is often split between yourself and the landlord. As you would expect, we would always suggest getting house and contents insurance as well, and just like anything, it just pays to shop around and compare and contrast some of the different premiums and options available to you. Some really good websites for you to look at when it comes to housing, to rent, and also to buy in the future is firstly trademe.co.nz, and just look at the property section, and secondly realestate.co.nz. Now, just to note at this point, any website that you see referred to throughout this webinar, we'll be emailing you a list of all of the websites that we refer to throughout this presentation, so you can refer to them at your leisure. We did some market analysis of some average weekly rental prices in various cities, and also specifically in suburbs of some of our main cities in New Zealand. These rates, market rates, are from February of this year, so only a few months ago. So of course, as I've mentioned, Auckland is our big city. It's also our most expensive. So Auckland Central, somewhere like Ponsonby, is the most expensive. You're looking between 800 and just over 1,000 New Zealand dollars per week. Somewhere perhaps a little bit more affordable, West Auckland, or also on the North Shore, is also a very popular and nice place to be around Takapuna. You might be looking anywhere between 500 or 600, perhaps up to 700 New Zealand dollars per week for a 3 to 4 bedroom house. So our Wellington is our capital city, a little bit more affordable, around $600 to $700 per week there. In fact, Wellington's been often rated one of the most livable and also most affordable capital cities to live in the world. Coming down to Christchurch next, so a couple of suburbs in the west of Christchurch and the south of Christchurch being referred to. The first one is Islay, and the second one is Hallsville. You'll see they're a lot cheaper, so 400 to 500 New Zealand dollars per week. And certainly the property market in Christchurch is not too strained, it's not too tight, so there is plenty of property available to rent, and it's quite a flat market out there, which is certainly good for new arrivals. If you want to get a lot of house for your money, then Invercargill or Dunedin might be places to consider. Something like Invercargill, right at the bottom of the South Island, you can get a property between 240 and 250 New Zealand dollars per week. So if and when the time comes for you to buy a home, there are a few differences in terms of the process and also the structures of homes. So a lot of urban homes are standalone, and that's because we have a lot of space in New Zealand, so we're not too accustomed to being built too close to our neighbours. And the homes are generally built of wood, so we have a lot of good timber, a lot of big forests in New Zealand, so we like to make use of that. So a lot of timber frame homes are in New Zealand. Typically, houses are a little bit colder in New Zealand than perhaps what people might be accustomed to, especially some bungalows and perhaps government-built homes in the 50s, 60s, and 70s are a little bit colder. They often, or almost always, don't have central heating, and a lot even don't have double glazing. Certainly, all new homes are nice and warm and well insulated. But it's something to pay attention to when you are researching a property, understanding how it is heated, if it's got double glazing, and what sort of insulation it might have in the walls and ceilings. In terms of looking at property, of course, everything's online these days, but you can also look at special property features in Wednesday and Saturday papers. Open homes in the weekend are really accessible, and also on Wednesday afternoons as well. So the estate agent will open the house for half an hour to 45 minutes, and then members of the general public are able just to flow through the house, register their details, and take a look around at their leisure. The actual transaction of buying a house is relatively straightforward in New Zealand. We don't really have big long chains where the house is subject to the sale of the house and so on and so forth. Of course, you can make special conditions in terms of that transaction, so things like a building inspection, ordering the limb and title from the local council, and also things such as finance. So typically speaking, in New Zealand, there is a requirement for you to have a 20% deposit in order to buy a house. And another thing to bear in mind in New Zealand is that auction is a very common way of buying and selling in New Zealand. So a lot of houses are now being sold that way. We would always suggest you go and attend some auctions, sit in the auction room, understand how the process works and how it plays out on the day. Basically, you're bidding to buy the house unconditionally. So you do all of your due diligence before the auction, you get your building inspection, you get your finance organised, and you bid to buy and own that house. And if you were to be a successful purchaser, then you'd be writing a cheque for 10% of the purchase price on the day. It's some medium house prices. So as I've mentioned, Auckland by far and away the most expensive. Around $720,000 is the average property price. That was also having a flow-on effect to areas such as the Waikato and Bay of Plenty. So cities like Hamilton and Tauranga on the coast are starting to see an increase in property prices because people are being pushed out of the Auckland market. Coming down to Wellington, just shy of 400,000 on average. And then in Christchurch, you're looking at about 425, perhaps 450,000 as of late seems to be about the average price there in the Christchurch region. We're looking at healthcare net. So the New Zealand public healthcare system provides free public hospital treatments, healthcare during pregnancy and childbirth, also subsidies on GP visits and prescription medicines. There are 40 public hospitals throughout New Zealand. In New Zealand, we have an excellent system called the Accident Compensation Corporation, or it's typically referred to as ACC. ACC is a fantastic government scheme where basically if you're an employee, you would pay, your employer would pay an ACC levy, okay, into a big fund. If you're self-employed, you would be responsible for paying those ACC levies yourself. How the ACC system works is that if you're injured, actually at work or on a construction site, or in fact if you're out playing football on the weekend or out skiing and you injure your knee and are off work for a lengthy amount of time, then you would be covered by ACC for your rehabilitation, but also it would cover you for up to 80% of your income during that time off work. So what that means is that in New Zealand typically there's not any suing. You're not taking legal action against an employer or against a work site, things like that. And I think it really just fits in with the whole sort of way of life and mentality of New Zealanders. And it's also a very good peace of mind if you have a family to support, knowing if something unfortunate was going to happen, that you'd still be able to provide for your family. Of course, many New Zealanders still elect to have some private healthcare insurance as well for immediate treatment of non-urgent conditions. As you expect, there's a wide range of insurance policies for different premiums. Those who take up private healthcare are still entitled to the free public health services for essential accident and emergency care. A good website to look at is healthfunds.org.nz for more information on some providers for private healthcare. Looking at some basic costs of healthcare, so a general GP visit, those under 6 are typically free. Those during school years are between $10 and $25. Adults, you're looking between $15 and $65, and those over 45 might get a slight discount there, looking between $15 and $35. The thing to understand here, and probably what is most obvious, is that there are large ranges here. So a 17 to 44-year-old could pay between $15 and $65, which is a large range. Now that will be based on a number of factors. Number one is location, of that practice. So someone in Central Auckland, a GP practicing in Central Auckland, is going to charge closer to 65. A small rural GP might charge a little bit less, or a suburban doctor in Auckland would charge a little bit less. The good thing in New Zealand is you're able to shop around. You're not expected, or you don't have to go to your local GP. So when you first arrive in New Zealand, you might go and see your GP for the first time. You then might move across the city with work, or move into a new house. You still have the option to maintain that relationship with your existing GP. So you can, of course, shop around and examine the market and find the best price and opportunity for you. Prescriptions are subsidised, so those 6 years and older, the maximum you would ever pay is $15, and under 6 prescriptions are free. One thing that is quite expensive in New Zealand is the dentist. So around $75, probably closer to $100 in a lot of cases for a basic checkup and x-ray and clean. So we would always suggest, if you have the opportunity, to go and see your current dentist before you head to New Zealand, perhaps get some fillings done and things like that before you head to New Zealand. That might be a good decision. So looking at education next. So schooling is compulsory from the ages of 6 through to 16. However, most children commence school soon after their 5th birthday. And children actually join the school year throughout that year. So there will always be 5-year-olds joining the new entrance class throughout the year. Our school year runs a little bit differently in New Zealand. So typically it just runs on the calendar year. So the first term begins end of January, start of February, and runs through to Easter time in April. And then from April through to July is term 2. Term 3 is July to September. And then term 4 is from mid-October through to early to mid-December, depending on the children's age and exams. So the big break in New Zealand is around December and January time. That's when they get a good 6 weeks or so off, and that's because it's summertime. Okay, so businesses really wind down then, people go on holiday, school's out, everyone's feeling pretty good. Free secular education is available in New Zealand. Often you'll pay what's called a compulsory donation, perhaps of $200 or $300 for the year for your child to attend that free secular education. The school years go from 1 through to 13, and NCEA is the governing academia system in New Zealand. Certain cities have zoning as well, so that's something to be very aware of, especially the larger cities. Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch generally have zones. and what that will do is have an impact on the rental prices and also the property prices to buy houses as well. Those schools which are deemed to be more desirable, the houses in that zone will be more expensive. So that's something to be aware of. And most schools make their school zone very, very easily accessible online on their websites. So looking at the 13 school years, so primary school is years 1 through to 6. Intermediate school is years 7 to 8, and in a lot of cases, those two schools will be combined. So for example, I went to a primary school that went from year 1 through to year 8, at which point most people are off to high school, okay, so starting a separate school, a new school in year 9, and that will go through to year 13. So from the ages of 13 through to about 17 or 18, depending on the child. The examination years are years 11, 12 and 13, which is NCEA levels 1, 2 and 3. New Zealand has a well-regarded tertiary education set up as well. We have 8 universities. We also have 20 polytechnic and institutes of technology. Government subsidies and student loans are available. I think this is something really important to understand in terms of if you have children or if you're looking to study yourself, understanding what visa you're going to be on in New Zealand and what potential flow-on effects that might have for you when it comes to access to student loans and subsidies and things. So certainly engaging with BORE from Migration Associates today or after this webinar is very, very important because it's something that you do need to factor in. In terms of loans, studying in New Zealand is relatively affordable. So a full-time first-year arts degree, you're looking at fees of around $3,000, and it's very similar for a business degree. Student loan for a first-year full-time medical degree is approximately 10,000 New Zealand dollars. Here's some really good websites as well for you to have a look at for some more information on the study, but as I mentioned before, we will be emailing these through to you later on. Okay, now next is the New Zealand driver's license. So a lot of you will want to and need to drive in New Zealand. Our public transport system is not as good as other countries in the world, so we do have a large dependency on the motor car. The minimum age to apply for a license is 16, and there are 3 stages which you would go through. There's the learner's license, the restricted license, and then the full license. So if you want to complete everything as quickly as possible, you can actually have your full license in New Zealand by the age of 17 and a half. If you hold a current and valid overseas driver's license, you can drive that for a period of 12 months in New Zealand from the date you arrive. At which point, most of you will probably want to transfer across to a New Zealand license. Okay, now for those of you from the UK watching in today and also from South Africa, all you need to do is have your relative and current driver's license, go into a local AA, fill out an application form, do a quick eye test, and then just pay a transfer fee. Now, officially it's $157.70. However, the feedback we get is typically they don't charge you the full rate if you are just surrendering an overseas license and getting a New Zealand one, and we understand that the cost is close to 50 New Zealand dollars. Okay, sometimes there might be a requirement for you to take further driving tests, but certainly for the most part, people are not actually required to take a practical driving test. Next, we're going to have a look at the cost of living, and this is probably a question that we get asked a lot about. People are worried, are they going to be okay? Will they get by financially down in New Zealand? So some things will be more expensive in New Zealand, and that's simply due to our lack of consumer power and distance. We're a small market, we're buying less goods, and also they have to be shipped a long way. So those costs are going to be passed on to the end consumer. We have 15% goods and services tax, or GST, which is the equivalent of VAT on our goods. And New Zealand tax rates on personal income are less than the OECD average. So you're looking at 33% on income over 70,000, 30% from 48 to 70,000, and 17.5% for the lion's share of most people's income, so from 14,000 through to 48,000, and then just over 10% for the first 14,000 New Zealand dollars earned. Some prices of general goods, so petrol, a litre of 91 octane petrol, you're looking at $1.87 per litre. Send a postage stamp back to the United Kingdom will cost you $1.90. Flat white coffee, so we love our coffee in New Zealand. We think we're pretty good at making it, you know, all the guys and certainly the ladies enjoy, you know, going for coffee, and you'll pay between $4 and $5 for a nice flat white coffee. Looking at washing machines, so a front loader, you're looking between 750 and 3,000 New Zealand dollars. A top loading machine, you're looking between 500 and 1,700 New Zealand dollars. We've got all the big brands and, you know, latest electronics and things like that. You might just have to pay a little bit more for them, as I mentioned before. So a Panasonic 40-inch, you're looking around $600, and then a Samsung, for example, you're looking around just shy of 1,000 New Zealand dollars. Okay, next we went and did a comparison shop. We went and got a typical basket of goods from a local New Zealand supermarket called Countdown. Okay, we then also went online and did the same shop in the United Kingdom, South Africa, and Canada. And we just compared and contrasted the prices. So, of course, prices are always changing, things are always on special, but this will hopefully give you a general idea of some of the costs involved. Okay, so firstly, looking at New Zealand, so the typical basket of goods came out to be $66.51. In the UK, it came out to be £36.88, which, looking at the exchange rate, works out to be about just shy of £70. In South Africa, about 350 Rand for that basket of goods, which is about $32. And then in Canada, you're looking at about $79 Canadian, which is about 85 New Zealand dollars. So the thing to understand, of course, is how much your income is likely to be. You know, for example, I know, you know, that your earning capacity in New Zealand will be much greater than someone in South Africa. So don't be put off by, you know, the basket of goods costing you the equivalent of $32, you know, in New Zealand. Until you get out to New Zealand, it's very, very hard to understand and appreciate, you know, how things are. But it's also the way that we shop in New Zealand is a little bit different because things are very relaxed. We have a different way of life. You know, what that means is you've got more time, so you might not go to just the grocery store to get all of your food. A lot of people have, you know, veggie patches in their backyard, or they'll go to the local markets on the weekend to buy their fresh produce. Often as well, you might have a friend of a friend who, you know, owns a farm or works on a farm. You know, what they're going to do is, you know, perhaps make access to you, you know, some lamb, nice New Zealand lamb, you know, some sausages. You're going to have a bigger freezer so you can buy all your meat in bulk and store it that way. So overall, you know, your costs will be saved, and there are ways to be a little bit smarter with your dollars in New Zealand. So why move? So there's numerous reasons, but in terms of some statistics and numbers to throw at you, in 2015, a Mercer Quality of Life survey ranked Auckland number 3 in the world, based on 39 key factors such as housing, recreation, education, and political environment. In 2015, another Mercer Quality of Life survey ranked Auckland number 61 in the world, where the most expensive city in the world is number 1. So in comparison, London is 12, Sydney is 31st, and Wellington is 83. So to Kiwis, Auckland seems like an expensive place, but on the worldwide stage only comes at number 61. The economy and jobs. So recent job growth is expected to continue. There are 72,000 more people employed now than there were a year ago. An additional 150,000 people are forecast to be at work by mid-2019. Now remember, we're a small country, 4.5 million people, so these are relatively big numbers that we're talking here. Education, New Zealand 15-year-olds scored ahead of those in the UK on reading, maths and science in a UN Human Development Report last year. Social political, so New Zealand is the least corrupt nation in the world, tied first equal with Denmark, according to the Corruption Perception Index. Our landscape is fantastic. So in 2008, TripAdvisor named Milford Sound the world's top travel destination based on an international survey. Population, New Zealand is a similar size to the UK as a comparison, but only has a population of 4.5 million, as I mentioned, compared to 60+ million in the UK. Only 5% of New Zealand's population is human. The rest are animals, and the good thing is we don't have any snakes or dangerous spiders. Space. We have a lot of space. More people live in Auckland, so about 1.5 million people, than live in the whole of the South Island, where there's just over 1 million people. And lastly, innovation. New Zealand is the only country in the world where all the highest positions have been simultaneously held by women. In 2006, the Queen, the Governor-General, the Prime Minister, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and the Chief Justice were all women. And also, a lot of you may not know, in 1893, New Zealand became the first country in the world to give women the right to vote. I really like this quote. No matter where you are in New Zealand, you are approximately 15 minutes from somewhere spectacularly beautiful. For those who haven't visited New Zealand, you won't understand until you go there, just in terms of how ever-changing the scenery is. And lastly, we're about 30 minutes drive from the beach and just over an hour from the ski mountains. So that's Roger Stone, whose Skills and Demand Migration Associates assisted to move out to Christchurch about 4 years ago. Lastly, the Kiwi lifestyle is all about the 3 Bs. It's the boat, the beach, and the barbecue. So we love our access to the water, be it in the ocean, the mountain lakes, or the rivers, and we enjoy getting out on the water in a boat. A lot of people are lucky enough to have a boat, and it will be easy for you to get access to a motorboat or a kayak or something like that, just to get out with nature. The batch, so the holiday home, so we love getting away on the weekends. It's very easy to rent a house for the weekend, pack up the car and get on the road and really relax on the weekends. And lastly, the barbecue. We love our outdoor living, the good weather, the sunshine. So over summertime, it's not uncommon to be cooking 3, 4, or maybe 5 nights a week on the barbecue. Okay, so I'm going to change tack now a little bit. Hopefully that first section has been helpful in terms of you picking up some more information on the New Zealand way of life. I'm going to put my New Zealand Skills and Demand hat on now and talk to you about the actual process of finding work in New Zealand and how we could potentially help you as a company. So, Skills and Demand, we're a New Zealand-based company. Okay, we have a full-time United Kingdom presence of myself, my colleague Guy Lemon, and Susanna Dyson. We also have an account manager in Christchurch, New Zealand, Glenn Davis. So the advantage of having a split team up in the UK is it's very easy for us to talk to people in different time zones around the world. Obviously the UK, we can pick up the phone and speak to people here. South Africa is only 1 hour ahead of us, so it's very easy to speak to you as well. And also we can catch Canada and the United States later on in the day. In New Zealand we have Glenn. His job is to connect with the New Zealand employers. Okay, now the New Zealand employers, they are desperate for workers, and just as you have a lot of unanswered questions, often so do the New Zealand employers. So he spends a lot of time in conjunction with Bore, speaking to them about the visa process, and how to employ someone, and basically giving them that confidence, to go forth and solve their staffing issues from overseas. We work with large, reputable companies. So as I mentioned, Glenn is in New Zealand working with those companies. Okay, these are companies that have the ability and the willingness to employ overseas candidates. We've helped about 400 candidates make this move in the last 3.5 to 4 years. So we've been through a lot. We know what to look for. We know where the shortcomings and the issues can be in this process, and we're here to make the process as smooth as possible. The big focus of our company, especially from the start, has been the Christchurch development. So for those of you who aren't aware, in 2011 we had a large earthquake. which basically the Christchurch Central City especially sustained a lot of damage. Okay, some 1,500 buildings had to be brought down after the events of the earthquake due to damage. Okay, so there's a massive project that's likely to take 15 years, we think. I mean, we're already 5 years on, and only about 35 or 40% of the rebuild has been completed. We need thousands more skilled tradespeople to flow into the city. As I said, the central city is being largely redeveloped and rebuilt. There's a number of key anchor projects which are very, very big. So we're talking about new sports stadiums, community centres, hospitals, office blocks, technology centres, things like schools as well. So there's a lot of big projects that are getting underway and are yet to get away. Thousands of new homes need to be built as well. The residential market is slowing down in Christchurch, so the initial rush is sort of over. However, if you're looking at new home building, if that's your area of expertise, then Auckland will keep you very busy and happy for the next 15 to 20 years. There's also a lot of repair work which is being done on the horizontal infrastructure, and now it's a case of developing that infrastructure, new roads, motorways, changing the layout of the city as we have the opportunity to do so is happening as well. I think this slide is useful for everybody, okay, in terms of some of the documents that you're going to need to provide to the local New Zealand market. So an up-to-date CV first and foremost. Now, we will provide you with a free New Zealand CV template after this webinar. It's a Microsoft Word document, and it's formatted in a way that a New Zealand employer or recruiter will be able to understand and pull the information that they need from that CV. We'll ask a lot of you that we engage with after today to complete one of our background information forms, which is the NZSID CBD, which is the Candidate Briefing and Declaration form. So that gives us a snapshot of your situation right now, your time frames, your preferred role, your family situation, all those sorts of things. So that's a really good starting point for us to have. You'll need to collect written references. Okay, these need to be professional references on a company letterhead, an original document that's signed by a former employer, or if you've been self-employed, perhaps a client that you've done repeat work for. You need to get things like electronic copies of qualifications, certificates, licenses. Anything that's relevant to your industry or occupation, you need to get scanned and on file. We also recommend that you get a Skype username. Okay, a lot of interviews that we conduct, for example, I think we've got 6 or 7 happening this week, they're all happening on Skype. Okay, so get comfortable with Skype, download it, it's a free program, and that could be the difference between you getting a job in New Zealand or staying put. Lastly, but most importantly, you need to understand and also commence the visa process. Okay, a New Zealand employer wants to know that you understand the visa process and that you have your ducks in a row when it comes to getting the job offer, but then also applying for the visa once you gain that job, because employers don't want to wait long for you. Okay, so you have to be prepared to potentially be out in New Zealand 8 to 10 weeks after you get a job offer. Okay, now that's not in all cases. Sometimes you might strike it lucky and have an understanding employer, but certainly from Skills and Demands perspective, the expectation is that you're out there within 3 months. So on this slide, this is a hit list of the current occupations that New Zealand Skills and Demand is looking for. Okay, so if your occupation is on this list, I would love to engage with you after today. We need carpenters and joiners, scaffolders, plant operators, HGV drivers, bricklayers, general builders, quantity surveyors, diesel mechanics, steel fixers, welders, electricians who are New Zealand registered, ceiling fixers and petitioners, site and project managers, and plumbers. Wheels, tracks and rollers, so machine operators as well, and pipe fitters. Also hammer hands, painters, jib fixers and stoppers, and heating, ventilation and air conditioning engineers. Now, there's a massive trades and construction focus there, as I'm sure you can see. Outside of that, New Zealand Skills and Demand also focuses on accountants, especially those who are chartered or management accountants, and also in the IT space, there are particular roles which we are looking for. I think the thing to appreciate and understand is that we are one company in the market. If your occupation or industry is not outlined on this slide, please don't lose the faith. there are opportunities out there, and I'm certainly happy to point you in the right direction in terms of other options, other ways that you can look to try and find employment in New Zealand. Okay, so some final sort of takeaways or thoughts that I would want to give to you in terms of the process of getting out to New Zealand. Firstly, learn about New Zealand as much as you can. Decide it's a country that you're committed to making the move to. Attending this webinar is a great way of starting that process. Secondly, I suggest that you overcome any potential issues before the move. Be very realistic about this. Do you have a house to sell? Or can you just afford to rent it out before going? Do you have to sell vehicles? Do you have to close down businesses? Do you have to think about informing employers or business partners? Also talk to your young children about the move, and on the flip side, ensure that your parents and extended family are okay with you leaving. You need to work out when you want to arrive in New Zealand, but also more realistically when you can be in New Zealand. That's very, very important. Typically we'll work with a candidate, figure out what month they can be in New Zealand, and then work backwards from there in terms of when we put them forward for interviews. So we're not in the process of just spamming your CV up to the market. We take a much more subdued and concentrated approach in order to market you to the local market. Start getting your documents ready. Okay, start getting them through to myself, put them on the scanner so they're on file on your computer. So even if you're not ready to go to New Zealand, you've got all those documents there and ready. If you have the ability to apply for a working holiday visa, just get it. Otherwise, engage with an immigration advisor if you require a permanent job offer first to apply for a work visa or residency. Engage with our helpful partners. As I mentioned, it's fantastic that we have the help of and support of the Bank of New Zealand and Migration Cover as well. They're great resources to make your move easier and to also give you that peace of mind. And you'll also be hearing from another couple of our partners after today to help you with foreign exchange and shipping. And then hopefully you can book your tickets and get on the plane to enjoy a fantastic lifestyle and opportunity out in New Zealand. So it all looks quite easy on one slide. Obviously it takes a lot of work, there is stress involved, but I can honestly say that people we help make the move, all they say to me is, we wish we'd done this sooner. So take your time, get yourself set, but at the same time you just want to get yourself out there as quickly as possible, because until you start living the good life in New Zealand, it is hard to imagine how good life can be. Okay, well I'm going to pass you over now to Bore, who's probably been typing away in the chat room for the last 45 minutes or so. So Bore, are you there, mate?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Fantastic. And you can see the screen? Fantastic. Listen, it's been a pleasure just chatting with you all on the chat room. A lot of various questions about the move on visas and relocation and jobs. What I would encourage you to do, if you have any questions about jobs, is to liaise with Mark and his team. Okay. On the visa side of things, please do complete our online visa evaluation form, and our team can also liaise with you about your questions. It's really important that you do understand that you can't compare apples with oranges. So what I mean by that is that your situation is going to be very different to the person sitting next to you in the queue waiting to get to New Zealand. Your visa that you apply for may be different, and it's really easy to go on the chat rooms and forums and see other people's situations, but I can guarantee you now that their circumstances are going to be a lot different, and therefore their pathway to New Zealand will be very, very different. I guess the point that Mark was making in his presentation, and the key point that I get from all of that, it's lifestyle, lifestyle, lifestyle. Now, this is going to be the best investment that you're going to make in your life heading to New Zealand. The difference between this investment and a monetary investment is that you won't see money coming into your bank account with this move. Okay, the benefits that you get from this move are intangible. Okay, it's the benefit of seeing your children develop into well-rounded people with the schooling system in New Zealand. It's the benefit that you have with your relationship with your wife or your partner, because you're less stressed. So a lot of the benefits that you get from those, that value of life, you don't see in your bank account. Okay, and one of the key things is understanding and putting together a plan of attack, an immigration strategy, to make sure you can make that move. Now, for some people, this immigration strategy could be 18 months. It could be 12 months, or it could be 3 months. So again, it really does depend on your circumstances. And this is why understanding how the jobs work with the visas is going to be really important to you. And I'm going to go through the whole New Zealand immigration process generically. If you have any questions, feel free, post-seminar, to be in contact with us. Okay, so in terms of the New Zealand system, I'll just make sure that right, we're a little bit slow here with the here we go. So who are we? Well, Migration Associates, we're based in the UK, so we have a practice there, and I've since come back to New Zealand since April, and I'm going to be setting up and operating a practice here. We have 3 licensed immigration advisors currently, and I'll have another one joining us next week. We've assisted a lot of families and individuals to live and work in New Zealand. And I'm proud to say that a lot of those families and individuals have now got a fantastic lifestyle. I was in the gym, and I don't go to the gym much, but I was there, and I got a tap on the shoulder from a client that we'd assisted, and he gratefully thanked us and Skills in Demand, who he got the job offer through, for changing his lifestyle, and more importantly, the lifestyle for his children. So that was very nice. And I have bumped into previous clients here in Christchurch, and everyone is absolutely loving the new lifestyle that they have, which is fantastic. What makes us different from a lot of immigration consultancy companies is that we specialise only in New Zealand immigration. And because we specialise only in New Zealand immigration, we understand the policy. Okay, it can be difficult to navigate through the system by yourself, and because it's such a big move, we would always advise you to get advice about the process. You will find that the New Zealand immigration process is job-led immigration. What that means, in most cases, you will need a job offer to get through the process, and that's where our strategic relationship with New Zealand Skills in Demand is very, very important. They have contacts and clients who are based in New Zealand who can assist with the job process if you have the right skill set. Okay, and Mark's alluded to the fact that whilst they have a list of occupations, don't be disheartened if you're not on that occupation list, because there is a general skill shortages in most skill sets in New Zealand. So it's a really good time to be looking to make the move in New Zealand. Unemployment's very low, and the demand for skilled workers is certainly there. Where it all starts with your immigration is obtaining a free visa evaluation from our team. Okay, in order for us to start that process, you need to complete an online visa evaluation form. We'll be in contact and we'll complete your evaluation and have that emailed to you. This process allows you to understand, and I say you very importantly, because you have to understand this visa process. Okay, and the visa will be very dependent on your personal circumstances. Okay, like I said before, you may be going through a different pathway from the other person in line to get to New Zealand. Okay, and you need to take personal responsibility to understand the visa process, because that visa process will require time frames, will require you to budget for things, and therefore you need to plan this move to New Zealand, and the visa process is a large component of that planning. Okay, we confirm what visa you should apply for, and the information on the visa, the costs, and the time frames. Again, planning, and having a strategy in place. Okay, for those of you who New Zealand Skills in Demand can assist, we would provide an immigration report to New Zealand Skills in Demand, Mark's team, and that report will detail your eligibility and the anticipated timeframes of that visa process. That in turn will then give some confidence to Mark and his team and the clients they are working with in terms of how quickly we can get you over and your eligibility. So we see that report as being a very important part of the process. So in terms of visa types, so again, this is a very generic, rundown on the visa types. I'd like to start with the skilled migrant category, and this is where permanent residency can be obtained. I think, if you're a family, certainly want to be getting this visa. I certainly wouldn't be making the move to New Zealand without looking at residency straight away or after getting to New Zealand. It's based on obtaining points for qualifications and work experience and other capacity building factors such as age, work experience, etc. In most cases, it will be dependent on obtaining a job offer. Okay, the age cap is 55. You've got to meet the character and medical requirements, and as part of the process, the lodgement of an expression of interest will be needed. Okay, now it's important to note here that you only need 100 points to lodge an expression of interest. However, in order to make sure you get through the process, we wouldn't be lodging an expression of interest for any of our clients unless they've got a job offer in place. Once you've got a job offer in place and you lodge your expression of interest, Immigration New Zealand should invite you to apply for residency. At that point in time, you've got 4 months to submit your application, and once you've submitted your application, if it's lodged in the London branch, you're looking at about 4 months. If you lodge your residency visa application in New Zealand, you're probably looking at 6 to 12 months. Okay. Now, the upcoming changes in November refer to the changes previously in November, and that meant that basically people outside of Auckland got more points for job offers. Okay. The key point with these changes is that you've got a government in New Zealand that is encouraging people to move outside of Auckland, obviously for a lot of reasons, and obviously in order to do that, further points will be given to those people looking to move outside of Auckland. So very proactive step by the government and the policy there to encourage people outside of Auckland. Okay. Another way to get get residency is the work to residency visa under the accredited employer policy. Now, this is very much dependent on having a job offer with an accredited employer. Okay, so it's really key. And I think when you compare this with the other visa, I think this one here would mainly suit those who are single or have no children. You must have a full-time job offer. The employer must be accredited. You must earn 55k or more based on a 40-hour week. Meet the health and character requirements. Once you've worked for 24 months, you can then apply with the accredited employer. You can then apply for residency. Okay, it's approved within 15 working days. So unlike the skilled migrant category, the visa before this one that I discussed, residency is only obtained after working for 24 months. Okay, so you're somewhat bonded or required to work for that employer for 2 years, whereas the other one, once you've got the residency processed, you've got residency straight away. So that's the key difference. And if you're applying for work, one of the key questions is that employer accredited? Okay, and I would always find out that question. Okay, so if we move to the next slide. Okay, the next slide goes through a temporary work visa. Okay, and as discussed before, you need to have an offer of employment from a New Zealand employer. You need to have qualifications and or work experience related to the role. Okay, so for tradespeople, you may not necessarily have the qualifications, but if you've got at least 3 years of work experience, you can get through the process. I know that was a specific question asked in the chat room. Immigration New Zealand need to be satisfied that the employer has done as much advertising for New Zealand citizens and residents as possible. That's the labour market test. So that would require the employer to obviously advertise for the role. You need to meet the health and character requirements. The validity of the visa will depend on the occupation and location. So it could be 5 years, 3 years, or 1 year. Okay. Now, if you get a work visa, you travel to New Zealand, you're working for employer A. If you then get a job offer with employer B, you can then, obviously change, and you can vary the conditions of your visa. So the point that I'm making is you're not stuck with employer A. You can move to employer B on an essential work visa. Okay, process within 20 working days. And the recent work visa changes in Canterbury allow anyone in Canterbury to work for any employer in that specific role. So if you apply those changes, what that basically means is there's a freedom of movement between employees within the Canterbury region. So if you're a carpenter, you could work as a carpenter for any employer in New Zealand once your visa is approved. Okay, and that's to help ensure that employees and overseas international candidates are helping with that visa, helping with that rebuild process that's happening in Christchurch with the earthquakes of late. So again, another proactive step by the government to ensure that the visa process can be changed and be fluid to allow big projects to be completed. Okay, the working holiday visa. What I've got here is there is a working holiday visa scheme for a lot of countries. Okay, so for instance, the example I've got here is a British citizen. If you're under 31, you can apply for either a 23 or 12-month work visa. The purpose of it mainly is the holiday, but you can work on a fixed-term contract, whilst you're in New Zealand for less than 12 months. Once you're in New Zealand, you can then convert to a work visa or residency. Okay, so it's a great visa to obviously move through the ranks of, moving from a working holiday visa to a work visa. And certainly there's a lot of guys that have done that. Okay, you can work in any occupation whilst on a working holiday visa, and they are approved quite quickly. So again, my advice for you, if you can apply for a working holiday visa, depending on your nationality, is to get over here and experience that lifestyle. Okay, so I guess that's a very quick rundown on some of the visas, and I think the key point that I would like to make is that it's important how all these visas work together. Okay, and for us to implement an immigration strategy. Okay, what are the documents required? What are the various steps? Understanding the timeframes, the costs for budgeting perspective. Whether or not you apply for a skilled migrant category, permanent visa, and a work visa. So if I give you an example, we have applicants who get a job offer, they apply for a work visa alongside the residency visa under the skilled migrant category. The work visa will be approved quite quickly. That work visa will allow them to travel to New Zealand, start work, whilst the residency visa is going. And once the residency visa is approved, that will then supersede the work visa, and they will have residency. So you can apply for both at the same time, and again we would go through that strategy with you. Again, you could apply for a residency visa under the skilled migrant category with the work to residency visa, and as discussed before in the previous slide, you can convert from a working holiday visa to a work visa. So everyone is different. There is so much information on the Immigration New Zealand website, but I can guarantee you right now it's very hard to understand how all that information applies to you, and that's what's certainly something that we can assist you with. If I give you an example, we're dealing with a client at the minute whose employer called the helpline from Immigration New Zealand. They have advised their employer that they can do X, Y, and Z. They contacted me and I said that that information is incorrect. We've lodged the visa application, and the information provided by that helpline was incorrect, which is very frustrating. Okay, so there is a lot of information, there is a lot of point of contact, but because this is such a big move, my advice is to get advice from a professional advisor who will take into account your personal circumstances, who should know how the visa process works for you. In terms of the process, as part of the process, you'll need to meet the medical and character requirements, and some of you will need to get occupational registration. Okay, so with medicals and police certificates, you need to have an acceptable standard of health. I would always visit your GP and get a checkup. The medical is only valid for 3 months, so I would only get a medical once a job offer is confirmed. Okay, the medical must be obtained by a panel of doctors authorised by Immigration New Zealand. So you book your medical and your chest X-ray certificates once you have that job offer in place. In terms of the police certificates, you know, I would book them, you know, ASAP if you're looking to go out there within 6 months, because the validity for those police certificates is 6 months. You need to be of good character. It's very, very important that you disclose any you know, discretions in the past. If you don't, you know, Immigration New Zealand will find out, you know, and therefore it's really important that you do disclose everything. Okay, because if you don't, it's going to lead to delay, and in worst case scenario, it could lead to a refusal. Okay, so please make sure you do disclose any of those indiscretions that you have in the past. In terms of occupational registration, this refers to the occupations that need New Zealand registration to be able to work in that occupation legally in New Zealand. So some examples I've given are teachers, nurses, plumbers, electricians, and gas fitters. The legal requirement is you need to obtain registration to work in New Zealand. It is an extra step in the visa process and can be quite complex and time consuming. And the key thing here for you to understand is New Zealand employers will not consider you only until you've obtained registration. Okay, for some of these occupations we can assist you, so get in contact and we'll go through the cost and the time frames. But you know, it's almost like a visa process within itself, and that could in some cases delay you up to 6 months depending on the registration requirements for that certain occupation. So do look into that if that applies, and we can be in touch and go through that with you. So why use us? You know, firstly, we are licensed by New Zealand Immigration, the New Zealand government to give immigration advice. You have to have a license to give advice. We are required to meet CBD, continuing professional development requirements, and because of that, we would only take on clients that we think we can get through the process. So our success rate's higher, and we can navigate you through the process because we know the system, and that means there is less delay. The key thing is if you've got a job offer in place, you do not want to be you know, delaying the process because of your lack of understanding of the process. The key thing is once you've got the job offer, that employer will want you out there in New Zealand as soon as possible, and that job offer is your ticket to get out to New Zealand. So you can't really afford to have delays if you've got that job offer. What we will do is assist you with the documentation, preparation and procurement, and make sure that that's up to scratch in terms of what Immigration New Zealand would accept. We would liaise with Immigration New Zealand and your employer on your behalf to make sure that we get all the documentation. So there'd be documentation required from yourself, the employer. Okay, we would liaise with Immigration New Zealand to make sure it's processed quickly. We would create an immigration strategy with you. I think that's one of the most important aspects of this, because it's really important for you to understand what the process is for you and your family. We love paperwork in terms of the fact that we have to deal with it. We can't get you through this process without paperwork, and as much as we all detest dealing with paperwork, unfortunately we have to deal with this aspect to get you through the process. So we know what that paperwork needs to look like so that Immigration New Zealand can accept it, and we will definitely be telling you whether or not the paperwork you've got is acceptable. If it's not acceptable, we're not going to be lodging it until it is acceptable. Okay. In the long term, we'll save you time, money, and limit your stress levels. It is going to be a stressful process, and there is a lot. If you look at the pie chart, I would say that the visa process is maybe less than a sixth of other key considerations. and therefore you need to have some time and spend some effort with other aspects of the move. So instead of understanding or trying to understand the immigration process, get someone to do it for you so that you can spend time on other aspects of the move. I can tell you now, having recently moved back, and as a Kiwi, we didn't have the visa process as part of our pie chart, but I tell you what, there is so much paperwork that we have to do to make sure that all the aspects of our move was successful. Okay, so you need to make sure that you manage your time effectively, and we can help you with that. And most importantly, we will push you along the process to minimise delays. So if you're not providing us a document, whatever it may be, we will be pushing for that because we are acting on your behalf. So, you know, I'm slightly quite biased with this, obviously, given my role, but I do feel that we provide a lot of value, we provide a lot of confidence for you and your family, and most importantly, we make sure you navigate through this complicated process as smoothly as possible. I would challenge you all to look on our Facebook and our website for our recommendations and also our reviews, and I'm very proud to say that we have a very high review rating, which is the most important thing, and I have a lot of pleasure helping people through this process to have that better lifestyle. So it is the biggest decision you will make. You know, get advice from an advisor and make sure you have all your queries addressed before we start the process, and you know, I wish you all the best with it. Heaps of information from us. So this whole process of coming to the webinar today is to get as much information. Our Facebook page has got a lot of information about New Zealand, and you need to start understanding and reading articles, up-to-date articles on what's happening in New Zealand. We have other various social media channels such as Twitter and some pictures, etc., that do contact us and stay in touch with us in terms of, you know, some of the key things that we're doing as part of educating our client base about the move to New Zealand. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to have a question and answer session about the move out to New Zealand. Now, what we're going to be doing is we'll invite you to email us also after this webinar with specific questions, and we'll provide links to our key partners who can assist with aspects of the move. And in terms of, you know, with our key partners, obviously our sponsoring partners are the Bank of New Zealand Migration Cover. Obviously the bank can help with banking inquiries, whether or not it's mortgages or setting up a bank account. Migration Cover, certainly, you know, get some information from them about insuring the move. It's a very unique product where, you know, if things don't go well for whatever reason, you know, you can insure repatriation, etc. You know, so it is a costly move, and getting insurance will mitigate some of those risks for you. Moneycorp, who can assist with sending your hard-earned money and converting it into New Zealand dollars. And if you're in the UK, PSS Removals can help you ship your bits and pieces out to New Zealand. If you're in South Africa, we can provide you with a referral company out in South Africa who's trusted also. So I'm going to get Mark on board, and you know, and I guess the best way to do this would be for you to ask your questions on the chat room, and we will try to answer that best by speaking and answering those questions directly. So Mark, are you online?
Yep, I'm back on.
Fantastic. So I think what we'll do is we'll kick off. Does anyone want to ask any specific questions that we can answer live and directly?
So people are asking about email addresses and things. So Mornay, we'll be sending an email. Every single person that's registered and attended this webinar will receive a follow-up email, as I alluded to, with all the websites that we referred to in the presentation. So you'll have a record of them. You'll also get a link to this whole presentation so you can view it again. We appreciate that some people's internet may not allow you to view it. And you'll also receive my email address and also contact details for Bore. So you'll be receiving that in the next 24 hours or so.
Mark, I think maybe what we could probably do in this session is maybe let's speak about a recent case study, Mark. Maybe pull something out of at the top of your head, and we can maybe perhaps go through how that person got through the process, getting the job and getting the visa, and what that process would entail. That might be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, no, that's a good idea. So look, I think we can pick up on perhaps just some general themes. Firstly, unless you had something specific you had in mind.
Yeah. So generally, the starting point would be completing an online form, and from there, we would look at your situation, and if you had a skill set that Mark and his team could assist with, Mark would be in contact with you. Okay, and from there, Mark, from the visa perspective, would complete the evaluation, and Mark's team would request documentation from you in terms of their screening of your skill set. So, Mark, do you want to just speak about that process, and then how that then leads to an interview, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So any candidate that we engage with and deal with, of course, I have to make this clear, we cannot help everyone, but in terms of our clients in New Zealand, we do know what we're looking for. So that's why it's really important that we get you to complete the visa evaluation, because that will give us a snapshot and a basic understanding, along with an up-to-date CV. Generally speaking, from that I can figure out whether or not you'd be a candidate that we would be able to help. And from there we would have a chat to you on an individual basis, either in person here in the UK or on Skype if you're somewhere else in the world, and just explain to you the process in terms of your time frames, giving you some advice on the references, the qualifications that you need to get together. We'll send you checklists, we'll send you guidelines, which is all part of our free service to help you get a job, so that you can then go away and put in the hard work to get all that documentation in order. We will then review that in our office and go over everything with a fine-tooth comb. So it's our expectation, that when we put you forward to a New Zealand employer, we have you as close to a New Zealand candidate as is possible, the only difference being that you have to apply for a visa once you get a job. Okay, so that's our expectation. So for example, we had a HGV mechanic have an interview. He's from South Africa. He had an interview 2 Mondays ago, and at the start of this week he received a job offer, after a 40-minute Skype interview. And all he did, he and his wife went away and worked for about 2 or 3 weeks, getting his documents in order. I reviewed them, we made sure that they were really clear, well presented for the New Zealand market. He had a Skype interview with one of our employer partners, and within 2 weeks he had a job offer. And now they're applying for their visa, and they'll be out there, in the next 2 or 3 months. And that is realistically how the process can work. So, from the first day we meet someone or can engage with someone, we can, have you with a job offer and potentially out to New Zealand within 4 or 5 months. Some people it takes a lot longer, and that's fine.
And I think the key thing for you all is to go away from this webinar and think about when you can realistically make the move to New Zealand. Okay, because Mark and his team, or if you're working independently of Mark, an employer will not want to consider you unless you can be there within 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, so Nicholas is just asking, if your future employer asks how soon can you start, what do you say in a safe timeline? Well, look, Nicholas, it's very hard to know, because it all depends on, what visa are you applying for? Do you know what visa you're eligible for? If you're dealing independently of, the likes of our company, you need to know all this information. The only way you're going to know that is by engaging, with an immigration advisor. So if you're having to do the sell that we would ordinarily do to an employer, you can speak with some knowledge, and you can speak confidently on that basis, and so that's very, very important.
so from here, this chap who's got the job offer, we're now liaising with his employer from our side to get the documentation from him, and also getting the documentation from him and starting the medical process with him. So I would hope that within probably about 6 to 8 weeks, he should be here in New Zealand, starting that employment process. And to be honest, that candidate has probably spent, he's been on these webinars also, and he's probably spent 6 to 12 months investigating in the process about making this move. So it is a long-term process. For those who are looking to get work and understand that lifestyle, I would encourage you to visit New Zealand. Visiting New Zealand to look for work in November, December is probably a no-no, because the country is starting to move into Christmas and shutting down. Even in early January, it's a hard time. I find that if you like skiing and seeing kind of the beautiful scenery, winter's a good time. But most people come in March and April, okay, and then to see the country for what it's like in terms of lifestyle. So yeah, it's all about lifestyle, understanding your skill set, getting the right advice, and making the move. And the only people that can do that is yourselves. And I think what we'll probably need to do is wrap up this webinar. But myself and Mark will be on hand to answer any questions post webinar. You will have our details. And listen, we thank you very much for your time this evening, your time, to learn a lot more about that New Zealand lifestyle.
Yeah, just quickly before we finish, Bore, do you just want to answer there Alton's question?
Yep, Alton, you can come to New Zealand on a visitor's visa. It's really important that you do have a return flight back home to show that it is going to be a visit.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bore. Hey, well, look, as Bore says, we're going to wrap things up now. We're conscious of time. You will be hearing from all of us. You will all be hearing from all of us after today's webinar in the next 24 hours or so. So look out for an email from us that will have all the relevant links, information that you need to make the next steps in this process. And we thank you all very much for your time and engagement today.